You know, when you hear the word competition, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably something like Coke versus Pepsi, right? Or Ford versus GM. But what if I told you that's just scratching the surface? That the real competitive landscape is way bigger, way more complex, and honestly, a whole lot more fascinating. So, let's get into it.
All right, to kick things off, I want to challenge how we all think about this with just one simple question. But it's a question that I think really pulls back the curtain on how narrow our view of competition usually is.
So, here it is. Who's the biggest competitor to your local movie theater? I mean, really think about it. Your neighborhood cinema, who are they actually competing with? I bet the first thing that comes to mind is the most obvious answer.
Yep, the other theater across town, the big multiplex a few miles away. And look, that's the textbook definition of a competitor, for sure. But here's the thing. If we stop there, we are missing the entire story. The real threats? They almost always come from places we'd never think to look.
I mean, what about Netflix, YouTube, or even video games? All of a sudden, the playing field looks massive, right? Because they're all fighting for the exact same thing, your time and your money on a Friday night. They all scratch that same itch for entertainment and escape. They just do it in a totally different way. And believe it or not, we're still not done.
What about your couch? No, seriously. The biggest competitor of all might just be the decision to stay home. Your comfy couch, that series you're binging, a good book, all of those are substitutes for going to the movies. So the big takeaway here is that competition is literally everywhere. And if you want to be able to see it clearly, you need the right tool for the job. And luckily for us, that tool exists. It's this incredible framework developed by a Harvard professor named Michael Porter. It's called the 5 Forces. And honestly, it's kind of like putting on a pair of X-ray glasses. It lets you see all the hidden pressures and forces that are really shaping an entire industry.
So this framework shows us the competition isn't just one thing. It's actually 5 different pressures working at the same time. Yeah, you've got that direct rivalry right there in the center, the one we always think about. But you've also got pressure from new companies trying to break in, from your suppliers, from your customers, and from those sneaky substitutes we just talked about. All 5 of these together are what really determine how tough the competition is, and at the end of the day, how much money there is to be made.
Okay, so let's actually break this down. We're going to go through each of these 5 forces, one by one, and by the end, you'll be able to spot them in pretty much any industry you look at.
First up, force number 1, the threat of new entrants. Think of these as the outsiders, the newcomers looking to get a piece of the action. When a new player jumps into an industry, they can totally shake things up. They bring in fresh ideas, new money, and they're hungry to grab market share, which, you guessed it, puts a squeeze on everyone else's prices and profits.
So the big question with this force is always, how hard is it to get into this business? Is the door wide open, or is there like a giant wall around the industry? Basically, can anyone just set up shop tomorrow, or are there major barriers protecting the companies that are already there?
And these barriers, well, they're kind of like a moat around a castle. They can be all sorts of things, like economies of scale, where the huge companies can make stuff way cheaper, or brand loyalty that's taken decades to build up. You've also got stuff like high startup costs, needing special access to sell your product, or even government rules. Now, if those barriers are super high, then the threat from new guys is low, and the companies inside the castle can relax a bit.
Okay, on to force number 2, the bargaining power of suppliers. Every single business has to buy stuff from someone else, right? Whether it's raw materials, parts, or software. And the companies that sell you those things, well, they can hold a ton of power over you.
Think about it. If there are only, say, 2 companies in the world that make a crucial part you need, or if it's a huge pain to switch from one supplier to another, then they've got you right where they want you. They can jack up their prices, let the quality slip, and basically eat into your profits. Imagine a phone company that depends on one specific patented computer chip. That chip maker, they're holding all the cards.
All right, now let's flip that around and look at force number 3, the bargaining power of buyers. Because just like your suppliers have power over you, your customers, the buyers, have power too. I mean, they're the ones with the money, and they can use that power to demand more for less.
So, when is buyer power really strong? Well, it's high when your customers have tons of other options to choose from, or when they're buying from you in massive quantities. A perfect example is a giant supermarket chain negotiating with a small local farm. That supermarket can demand rock-bottom prices because, for that farmer, it's a make-or-break deal. They hold all the leverage.
And this next one, force number 4, brings us right back to where we started with the movie theater.
This is the threat of substitute products or services. Now, these aren't your direct competitors. They're alternative ways to solve the same problem for your customer. The better and cheaper a substitute is, the more pressure it puts on your whole industry. A classic example, ebooks. They became this massive substitute for traditional printed books. They fulfilled the exact same need, the desire to read a story, but in a completely new and different way. That, let's be honest, turned the entire publishing world on its head. And that brings us to the fifth and final force. This is the one we all know, the one we started with, rivalry among existing competitors. This is the main event, the head-to-head showdown. We're talking price wars, big ad campaigns, all the stuff that happens between the companies already in the arena.
Now, this rivalry gets really intense when you've got a bunch of competitors who are all about the same size, or when the industry isn't really growing much anymore. Or, and this is a big one, when it's hard to tell the products apart. In those kinds of markets, it is an absolute dogfight for every single customer, and making a decent profit is a huge challenge.
Okay, so now we have the 5 forces, which is basically a map of the entire competitive battlefield. But a map is one thing. How do you use it to figure out who's actually winning? Well, there's a really neat tool for that too. It's called the Competitive Profile Matrix, or CPM, and it helps you turn all this thinking into an actual concrete score.
It sounds complicated, but it's really a simple 4-step process. First, you figure out what really matters in that industry, what they call critical success factors. Think things like brand name, price, customer service, that kind of stuff. Second, you give each of those factors a weight based on how important it is. Then, step 3, you rate your company and your main rivals on each factor. And finally, you do a little math. Multiply the ratings by the weights to get a final score. It gives you a super clear picture of where everyone stands.
And here's a quick look at what that looks like. You can see the key factors down the side, things like online advertising and market share. And notice how market share has a pretty high weight. So when you score everyone, you see that even though competitor 1 is killing it in innovation, it's actually competitor 2 that comes out on top with a score of 2.89. Why? Because they're crushing it in those heavily weighted areas like market share and IT facilities. This is how you go from just talking about competition to having actual data to back it up.
So really, the big idea here is that once you start seeing the world through the lens of these 5 forces, it's like you've suddenly got strategic X-ray vision. You can look at any company in any industry and instantly understand what's really going on beneath the surface.
You're not just seeing the obvious rivals anymore. You're seeing the whole ecosystem. The power of suppliers and buyers, the threat of newcomers, and those sneaky substitutes. It's a total game changer for how you see business. So I'll leave you with this question. Now that you know about the 5 forces, what's one industry that you'll never look at the same way again?